How you guys doing? You know, okay? I'm so thrilled to be here. I have a long, deep heart connection with the Adventist faith, and I don't have time for it right now, but I want you to know that I really consider myself being alive today through a lot of the resources I've regained from Florida Hospital and the leadership there, both on a personal, physical, and spiritual path. So we'll talk about that another time. So what I want to start off talking about is a little bit about the why. You guys know Simon Sinek does a lot of TED Talks. Are you familiar with him? Okay. So he has this presentation where he talks about the why. He talks about when you look at a company, there's the what, there's the how, like what we do, how do we do it better than others, but then the deeper reason is the why. Why do we do it? And so I was thinking about that for my own life and about what am I, who am I, what am I all about, but really like what's the why, okay? So when I dive into the deep question about why for me, I really come to this core of myself that it's about community. Like why do I do the things I do? Like why do I come to a college and lecture about commercial real estate? Why did I write a book that's about careers that could be for any college major? Why do I give out full-size Hershey bars on Halloween, which I do in my house? We give out full-size Hershey bars. But you know what's the most important thing we give out, people really love on Halloween at my house? We give out full-size bottles of water, okay? And why do I do that? Well, I live in a nice neighborhood, and for the first third of Halloween, it's all my neighbors' kids. And then for the rest of the evening, it's kids that got bused in from other areas, right? And so I think to myself, why? Because I love my neighbor. And I feel God calls me to love my neighbor. I love that. I have a neighbor that practices it's a faith of, and it's pronounced, it's Benai. It's a Persian faith. And every year they have a holiday where they bring baked goods to our house. And the first time they did that, I was like, I don't know anything about your faith, but if it involves you making cookies for me, I'm really interested in your faith. So every Easter, we have a tradition in our house. We make a bunny cake. You guys ever make a bunny cake? You make the two circles, and you cut one off, and it makes the ears and the bow, and then you decorate like a bunny. It's really fun. So we've started a new tradition that we give them a bunny cake. So we're going to do that this Saturday. We're really excited about that, making our bunny cake. Anyway, so that's a little side note, but it's like at my core, who I am, the why is about community, and that really goes to my faith about serving community and serving neighborhoods. Real estate's part of that. Work with students is part of that. Talking about my dad a little bit, my dad was this interesting guy that he was a pastor and civil rights leader. And so much of the work that my childhood watching him do and all these different issues, we really try to carry that forward in the work that we do in real estate. Now, to start talking a little bit about careers in real estate, they've done surveys of kids who are doctors' kids, lawyers' kids, and preachers' kids. And do you know that they've proven this out, that the preachers' kids do better in life financially than the doctor's kids and the lawyer's kids? Did you know that? It's true. I actually don't know it's true, but it sounds great, doesn't it? No, it's true. So my theory on that of why is that? Why would it be that the preacher's kids would outperform the others? Well, if you're a preacher's kid, you grow up in an educated home, right? So like, in my house when I was growing up, and my dad, went 7 years of college education, so used lots of big words and talked about reading books and had big thoughts and big ideas. So education. And then we grew up in a household that had purpose. There was vision and saw things beyond ourselves and doing things for the right reasons and having the right motives. Like that was very much driven into us. The third thing was poverty, right? We were really poor growing up. So I tend to think about my childhood as being like having education, having purpose, and then not having any money. That's really kind of a good powder cake for success in life, okay? So when I went to college and I went to Florida State University, I decided when I went to college, I wanted to major in money. Like I got the whole service thing down, I got the whole helping other people out, but I really, really wanted to make money. If there was any way I could do that, that's what I was interested in. And so I started off as a finance major. And at FSU, they had a real estate degree. I didn't know that when I first got there. But they had a basics of real estate class. And I took the first class, and in that first class, Dr. John Lewis addressed the students, and he said, if you're a finance major and you switch to real estate, you're going to make more money and have more fun doing it. And at 19 years old, that sounded really appealing to me. I was like very, very interested in that. The other side note to that is I'm a very tangible person in that I never really liked much of sciences. But if I were to pick a science, I'd pick biology because I really kept like the human body. That makes sense to me. But when we started studying chemistry, something I couldn't really see, it was hard for me to understand that. That was a tough concept. When I was doing finance as a major, and we're talking about, portfolio management, right? Like, again, those things kind of was beyond me. But when I started about real estate, like, this is a piece of land. What are we going to build in this land? We're going to rent the spaces out. That, from a tangible financial aspect, just really, really clicked with me. And so that's what launched off my career in real estate. So what I want to do for you guys is I'm going to walk you through certain things. We're going to talk about real estate, commercial real estate as a big picture, as a career. Then I'm going to take you into retail real estate, which is what I do, which is shopping centers. We're going to zoom in on that. And then if we have time, we'll then jump over and talk a little bit about my book. Is that cool? All right. So I've got the slide here. This is my guide to commercial real estate. And I'd love it if you download it and take a read of it. This guide is really what I'm going to do part of the presentation from. And it's on my website. It's in 5 or 6 languages now. It's free, so you download it. Even if you're wondering why I make students download it, is I give a lot of lectures to real estate students who are majoring in real estate, and they always want to meet with me afterwards. They want to ask about jobs, and I always say, well, did you read the guide? Did you download it? Well, when you download it, I get an email. That's a little trick there for you, just so you know. So I always try to make sure the students kind of apply themselves a little bit. But I did print these extra copies, so I'll leave them here. So if you want to grab any of those, you can have those on the way out. That's great. But I want to walk you through that about sort of the overall career in real estate. Now, the thing about talking about career in real estate is it's a huge, big thing, right? There's a lot of different areas in real estate. And when we talk about it in a big picture, when I just talk about students in general who say they want to get in real estate, do you know what the number one answer is when I say what area of real estate you want to get into? You know what the number one answer is when students tell me is? Not residential. Good call, because that's probably the most common just in general is residential. And by the way, I don't know anything about residential. All the stuff here about commercial, but good answer. You else have an idea what that might be? Number one answer is developer. Developer is the number one answer I get from college students. You know why that is? They make the most money, absolutely. Developers make the most money. Do you know what else about developers? They're most likely to go to prison. They're also most likely to go bankrupt. They're also most likely to commit suicide. And apparently, they're most likely to become president of the United States. All of those are options for developers, okay? I didn't mean that specifically. I'm just saying. My point being is that people who want to become a developer, it takes a very unique personality to pull off that job. So when you think about somebody that wants to become a developer, I would say the kind of person who wants to become a developer is the kind of person that wants to become a conductor of an orchestra. When I think about, my wife and I have this argument, she always tells me she thinks the band is cool. When you go to a football game, the band is cool. And I'm like, I don't know if the band's cool, but the drummers are cool. Like the drum line is cool. So we have this sort of debate back and forth. Drum line is cool versus the whole band. But my point being is that if you are a conductor, you're not just about drums. You're about the drums, but you're also about the piccolo, right? And you're about the woodwinds, and you're about every single thing. And you think about how do all these instruments come together to make a sound, okay? Now, my real estate company, we do development. We do development all the time. We build shopping centers all the time. It's one division of what we do. That's not the division that I lead. Historically, my brothers led that division. We actually just hired a guy that's going to be kind of taking the division over. But my brother is a guy that's a very good, detailed guy. Like, he'll talk about, well, we should have brick going up the wall to here, and then we have the different kind of facade, and he could tell you about all these ways to come together. One day in my office, my brother said to me, hey, John, what did you think about the new color paint I put in the foyer of our building? This is our building we work in every day. To which I said, you painted the foyer? I have no sense of that, right? That's not me. I'm not a developer type. I like sales, and I like big picture marketing things, but I'm not this detailed person. If you come to my office in Orlando, if you really pay attention, you'll notice the artwork, the lighting, the position of the lighting, all throughout the entire building is all orchestrated. But that's my brother's brain of how that comes together. So my point that is sometimes when you have students who are achievers, and I would venture to say most, if not all of you are achievers, and what I mean by that is that like you're not in this room because you've made hundreds and hundreds of bad decisions. The reason why you're in this room is because you made hundreds and hundreds of really good decisions, right? That's true. You guys showed up. You've done make a lot of good things. That's why you're here. So a lot of times when students think about real estate and they have commercial, they tend to think developer because that's kind of the high watermark, right? But the problem with that is that like it also, again, highest level income also attracts all kinds of other issues. And I'm not joking when I say bankruptcy. I'm not joking when I say suicide. I'm not joking when I say that. That has happened. In Orlando, several years ago, I partnered with a group of guys to build some apartment buildings. And so I'm a partner in these developments. And these apartment buildings are right next to Millennium Mall in Orlando, which is one of the highest end malls in the country. Orlando is the only city in the entire nation that has a top 10 mall and a top 10 outlet mall in the same city. And that's because of all our tourism, right? So there's apartments building right next to this big mall. I was at a conference down on the south end of town, and I was leaving, and my wife called me, and she said, John, Steve's dead. And Steve was our managing partner for the development. And so I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, apparently he was murdered. So I called our other partner. Well, come to find out, he wasn't murdered. He killed himself. He was building our deal, but another deal he was losing money on, so he was stealing our money and putting it into the other deal. And he was just about to get busted by the feds, and so instead of like manning up and deal to go to prison, he shot himself to try to, just escape the whole situation. So I say this, and it's what's funny about it is, had he not killed himself, he'd been out of jail by now, and he'd still be rich. He'd still be pretty rich. But people start thinking about like, I went with $4 million or $40 million or $400 million. That's all kind of part of that brain that comes together to make success developers. Does that make sense? So my point is, my first thing is when you think about getting into real estate, commercial real estate, one of the first things I challenge students to think about is you got to know thyself and know what kind of personality you have and what drives you, okay? A lot of the top-end jobs in real estate have to do with sales, have to do with leasing, and a lot of those jobs are 100% commission. So when I graduated college, I was 22 years old. I got $1,000 a month for 6 months, and then after that, I was 100% commission. And I was 100% commission until probably about 4 or 5 years ago when I started changing the structure of how my company was working. But I'm talking for years and years and years, and it's still true today. My income every year still fluctuates significantly. But when I was on commission stuff, man, if I don't get this deal done this month, I don't have any money next month to pay my rent. I've been through that a ton. So sometimes people will say, gosh, John, I want to have this really successful real estate career. I want a big salary, I also want big upside. Well, in the real estate world, it doesn't work that way. But for the right person who really wants to succeed and they really want to do sales and they like working a ton of hours, it's a great job, okay? So first thing when you sort of think about the whole world of commercial real estate, think about that. Personality, okay? Then I want to talk about different buckets of real estate. It's kind of interesting. The first one has to do with just brokerage. When we think about the area of brokerage in real estate, so if you think about like residential, selling houses, okay, there's that world, which is extremely different than my world. And just so you know, if I ask my staff today, what's the worst phone call you get? It's from a realtor. When realtors call on us and are trying to do deals, because our language is so different, but people think it's not, we end up having sort of lots and lots of issues. So that's kind of a problem because it's just very different culture. Like when I sold my house, I hired a realtor because I don't know how to sell houses, okay? But anyway, so when you think about it, you have project leasing, and then the next sort of up from that is called tenant rep, and the next thing up from that is investment sales. Let me walk you through each three of those. So the first thing, project leasing. Project leasing looks like this. I have a client that owns a shopping center. The client owns 100,000 worth of shopping center. Maybe it's got a Publix in it. Maybe it's got PetSmart in it, and it's got vacant spaces. So the leasing agent's job is to go out there and talk to people, try to get retail businesses into that shopping center. And when you put a tenant in there, you sign a lease, you get a commission on that deal, and you represent the landlord. When it comes to tenant rep, a tenant rep broker represents tenants, and they put tenants into different buildings. So like in the office building world, can you imagine working in downtown in Manhattan and working in that area, and somebody says, let's pick a tenant. Microsoft says, we need to expand our presence in Manhattan, and we need 50,000 square feet of Class A office space. And then you're calling on, well, which tower in Manhattan is the right tower to be in? Do you need to be close to Grand Central Station? Do you need to be close to Central Park? Where do you need to be, right? And why? Or do you need to be in the financial district? What does that look like, right? Some businesses need to be in Times Square versus another part. So that's your job. And then that third area, investment sales brokers are selling properties, and it's based on the income of the properties, and they're trying to sell it to investors. So in the world of commercial real estate, you typically have three big arms. You have industrial, you have office, and you have retail. So let's talk about office first. So office looks like probably what you imagined it to be. There's an old coffee table called Skyscraper Dreams, and it's a book where all it is just pictures of these really cool office towers. So anybody who hears from a major city, Dallas, Trammell Crow built a lot of those towers. Detroit, some big towers downtown Detroit. Like every major market has towers in them. And that's somebody's job to lease those buildings, which is pretty cool. When you work in office, who are you negotiating with all day long? White-collar business people. You're negotiating with lawyers and architects and engineers and people that speak a business language. And some people love that. They love coming to work and negotiating in that environment. Industrial buildings, you guys know about industrial buildings, right? So industrial buildings are, they could be completely air conditioned. Like Publix has a huge industrial buildings in Lakeland, Florida, where you can go inside 400,000 square feet and it's at 32 degrees. Can you imagine coming to work and driving a forklift and putting a parker on in the middle of summer in Lakeland, Florida, and driving around? Well, people do that because all kinds of companies have warehouses. Some are dry. Some have, there's no air conditioning. There's nothing at all just because they're storing some generic product. Some are air conditioned. Some are freezers, right? You know one of the big issues they have in those places, that if you have a freezer area and then the other area is just air conditioning, is the temperature between the two and how you get ice on the floor. Little issues have to deal like that. So if you're a leasing agent and you handle those industrial buildings, you're typically dealing with sometimes blue-collar people, well-educated, but blue-collar kind of folks, or warehouse kind of folks. You might be working with a trucking company, working with the manager of a trucking company that needs to lease all these buildings. Now, I say that, you might think, gosh, John, office leasing sounds really cool. I don't know how cool industrial leasing sounds. I'm like, well, it may not sound cool until you get your paycheck and you're like, wow, this is fantastic, right? It's a big business. And not every community needs an office space, but I can tell you every community needs industrial because you're buying products, they got to come from somewhere. And then the third one, shopping centers. Man, I love shopping centers. You know what I love about shopping centers? I grew up being a preacher's kid, we moved around a lot. So I came from an environment where we were moving and I had to meet different people. I went to different high schools, and so I like meeting new people. I like hearing their stories. When I was doing leasing in shopping centers, I had one shopping center in Kissimmee, Florida, where I leased to people from 9 different nationalities. And I thought that was so cool. I love meeting people and saying, tell me your story. And they were born in Pakistan, and they moved to Kissimmee, Florida because they wanted to open up a gift shop. And I got a friend of mine, and his family's been in Orlando now about 50 plus years. They're extremely wealthy. And I always love hearing his stories, his perspective on the things he buys and he sells through his stores. One of the things he told me is, for years they were doing 3 t-shirts, and then the 4th one you got a discount or something like that. They changed it recently to go, you get 3 and then the 4th one free, and they're selling better. And get this, they're selling them for more money. Like it costs more money, but how they do in the marketing for it, their margins go up. I think that's so cool, and I'll talk about more retail in a minute, but that's more how my brain works, right? So if I were you and I was thinking about commercial real estate, I'd be thinking about, well, what are those areas of real estate that appeal to you, okay? Now, another big picture thing about real estate is the difference between corporate and institutional, okay? Corporate and institutional. Institutional real estate is people that are investing in real estate for a return. So like if you were getting recruited by JP Morgan, JP Morgan has billions of dollars, right? And some of that money they put into the stock market, some of that money they invest into office buildings, okay? So you could go work for AEW or JP Morgan or Clarion or any number of different pension funds where you're investing, money on behalf of a pension fund, and instead of investing in the stock market, you're investing in real estate. One of the most hottest things people for invest in is apartments, right? People all over the country always kind of need a place to live. They have to have that. And apartments usually do well, upturns, downturns, so investing in those areas, okay? So that's institutional real estate, is the investment into real estate. Corporate real estate is real estate users. So they own real estate because they use it. So what's an example of that? Can we think of an example of that? We'll just wait here awkwardly. How about that? How about McDonald's? Maybe? Is that an example? Okay, why don't you give me one?
Movie theaters.
Movie theaters, there you go. Right? So if a theater buys a piece of land and builds it up, they're using it not as an investment per se, but for selling their product, right? Exactly. So Walmart would be an example of that. Any company you can think of that's of any scale is going to have a real estate need from a corporate, even a smaller one. So like if I said to you in the room, you're business administration majors, and I would say, are any of you have a goal of being CEO of a company of any size? Do any of you have that a goal that Perhaps that would be something you might want to accomplish. There you go. So you think if you're a CEO of a company, can you think that understanding corporate real estate might be important to you? Do you think the Adventist healthcare system owns any real estate? A lot. So like dive into that. You ever think about what does Adventist healthcare system spend on janitorial services a year? Have you any idea what that number might be? Or landscaping? Or even like TI work, tenant improvement work, or moving walls, or having to upgrade bathrooms, right? So even if you never go into commercial real estate like in my guide, just the concept of understanding the basics of real estate is pretty important, as you might imagine. Because understanding that. How about Amazon? People say, Amazon's killing retail. Well, not so fast. Actually, they're buying some retail. But don't you think that somebody's in charge of that warehouse space? And what if one of those warehouse spaces has a leak? Somebody's got to fix that. Somebody's got to run that property. Does that make sense? But so if you think about like, what's the coolest, hottest retailer you can think of, somebody's running their real estate. Somebody's job is to find their next location, okay? If you're trying to think of the hottest, coolest business you can think of, somebody works for Amazon and acquires the real estate.
Tesla's new Gigafactory?
Yes, exactly. So somebody is working on that, right? And by the way, whether it's Amazon or Tesla, do you think that if that person that's leading that assignment, do you think if they decide to go into Chattanooga, do you think the mayor's going to meet with them? Do you think the governor's going to meet with them? Do you think that that's probably a pretty important meeting for that person to have? And for that person to understand the nuances of how to build a team to negotiate the best deal, that's pretty important, right? What did Will Rogers say about real estate? God's not making any more of it. Good thing to invest in, right? Okay? All right. The other things I want to mention is there's an area of real estate called appraisal. And appraisal is simply the valuation of real estate. And so there's areas like that, like people hire appraisers to come in and just tell the value of the property. And so that area, that's not a sales job, that's not a leasing job, it's more like a consulting kind of job. And there's real good value in that work, and there's consistency. There's property management, which is running the properties for somebody. So I talk about like development being on one end of the spectrum, high risk, high return, and then sales and leasing being 100% commission. But there's another segment of it, which property management, facilities management, running the properties, appraisal, which is lower income, but it's stable income and much more secure income. Okay, so I talk about that in the guide, and there's a stretch between all that. I also talk about location and like where you live, and that being a big deal. In real estate, commercial real estate, it's a little different than some other areas. This is not always true. But you know how in a lot of business careers, you could say, gosh, I could live anywhere. I could go anywhere. I could do any job anywhere. And if you became a specialist in something in healthcare in LA, and there was a really cool job opening in Chicago, it'd be really easy for you to like recruit it and then move to Chicago. Like that happens in a lot of areas of business, no big deal. That is not nearly as common in real estate. And the reason why is because real estate at the end of the day is still a localized business. There are some big companies that move people around, that for sure. But a lot of times once you pick a location to live and do business in real estate, and you know that market really, really well, that's where your value is. Okay, so my company, we operate in the 8 states in the southeast US. We go from Florida and Mississippi to Virginia, everything in between. And the closer it is to me specifically, geographically, the more power I have. Okay, so if I said tomorrow I'm going to move to Seattle, and as successful as I've been in Southeast US, I moved to Seattle, it would be really tough for me to ramp up a business there. The reason why I tell you guys this is that if you're thinking about getting commercial real estate, and I'm picking on you, Matt, right? Matt? So if Matt goes back to Detroit, and you said, man, I'm really going to get in commercial real estate in Detroit, you're probably going to, that cast has died. You're probably going to be in Detroit doing that business for a long period of time. And it's a lot tougher to transition out of that. Whereas other industries, it's a little easier. Does that make sense? So I just sort of think, when people think about that, it's really hard business to get in, and then once you get in, it's kind of hard to get out, because you end up making good money, and then it's hard to move. Okay? Make sense? Cool. All right, so a couple things I want to mention. On page 11 of the guide, I mentioned some different trade associations. If you're really interested in getting commercial real estate, I want you to write these down. ICSC, ULI, ICSC, ICSC, ULI, and NAIOP. The reason why I mention those three is all three of those trade organizations are very friendly to students. They're different areas of the industry. ICSC is for shopping centers. ULI is for developers and academics and consultants. They do a lot of new urbanism, really cool stuff, really, really cool stuff. I was at one of their conferences in San Francisco a couple years ago. They had Condoleezza Rice giving a presentation. Totally, really cool, impressive stuff. And the last one, NAIOP, NAIOP, used to stand for National Association of Industrial and Office Properties. Now they do kind of everything, but they still have a bent towards office industrial. The reason why, if you have a little bit of interest in real estate, I tell you to join them is it's not that much money. It's pretty cheap to join. When students are applying for jobs for me, it's the number one thing I look for. Like if you said, hey, if I graduated from Southern and someone graduates from FSU and they've got a degree in real estate and I've got a degree in business administration, but if you had active membership in those three organizations, I'd pick you first. I'd pick you first. You know why? Because it shows you're making an investment in yourself. And if you're getting their emails and you're reading their trade publications and you're pushing yourself, there's ways you can make yourself very competitive, and that's one of them. And I'm telling you, I can't tell you how many times I've lectured at colleges where the students are majoring in real estate and I tell them that, and about 4% do it. And I'm telling you, it puts you in the top 1%, one that's on your resume. So it's a good thing to check out, something you're interested in. Okay? Yes?
I just wanted to mention that this guide that he's referring to will be posted in his class.
Cool. All right, I'm going to switch gears and start talking a little bit more about shopping centers in a more specific way. Before you, any big picture questions about commercial real estate? Anybody? Super interesting, right? Yeah, okay. Any questions?
Well, I have one.
Go ahead.
In terms of international holdings, is there any licensure that you have to have in order to be qualified, or have you ever?
No. But I would tell you that the question is about international, trying to go into international business. It is very, very hard. That's one of those things that's very, very difficult. The people that I've seen who've done that really well is they end up partnering with somebody in the country they're interested in and usually creating a joint, and that's what makes that work. Whenever I've seen it work, that's when I've seen it work. When I've seen it blow up is when they partner with the wrong person. But yeah, I mean, that's what I tell you is that real estate's very localized. So even a company that's a Fortune 500 commercial real estate company will go into different international markets and still partner with somebody local because there's so many nuances to that. I mean, it's hard. Look, it's hard to go into small markets in the United States if you don't have a local presence. That's tough to do. So we start completely different cultures, different languages, and things like that. So it is done, but man, it's not for the faint of wallet, right? You got to really know how to partner with the right people and make it happen. Okay? All right, so you guys want to talk about shopping centers? Okay. First off, I do encourage you to connect with me, particularly on LinkedIn. You guys are all business people. You're on LinkedIn, right? Everyone here is on LinkedIn? Yeah. Well, listen, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Let me tell you why you might want to connect with me on LinkedIn. The first thing is, if you really had a question for me today and you just didn't want to ask or whatever, you think about it tomorrow, you can always message me on LinkedIn and ask your question. You can email me as well. I'll leave my cards here. And if you ask me a question today or tomorrow or 5 years from now, you're welcome to. And what happens if you're graduating in 2 years and you're going to go back to Dallas, let's say. Ben? Yes. Right? Ben. So let's say Ben's going back to Dallas and he's like, man, I'm trying to make a connection with somebody, and he goes on my LinkedIn and we're already connected, and you see that I have some contacts in Dallas. You could email me and say, hey, John, I hear you're connected to so-and-so. I'm actually interviewing with that company in a week. Can you give me some advice? And I'd be glad to do it. How many connections do I have on LinkedIn? You might be wondering. I have 28,500. Okay? So, but once you get connected to me, you can see all of my connections. Now, if you wanted to get into real estate and you're connected to me, and somebody's looking at your LinkedIn and they see you're connected to me, what are they going to think about you? They're going to think, wow, this is a student that's probably been through one of John's presentations. He does a lot of, that's kind of what he does. That's kind of what I'm known for. So you connect us, connect our brands. By the way, at this point in your career, I hope you're really taking your personal branding very seriously. And I hope you're really thinking about that, right? And you're thinking about what you're posting on LinkedIn. You're thinking about what you're posting on any kind of social media. And by the way, don't worry about me, but if I were you and I was in this class, every time you have a guest lecture, I'm going to tell them to do this, Matt. They're not going to do it, but it's a good idea. You should do it, okay? Every time after me you have a guest lecturer come in and they're lecturing just like this, you should do, take a picture of them while they're lecturing. Post it on your LinkedIn and tag them and their company and say, gosh, I had this great presentation by so-and-so from Coca-Cola. Thank you so much. What a great job. Okay? Do that. And you might say, well, John, what happens if 84 students do that every single time? So do it. Why? Do it. If somebody's looking up you on your LinkedIn, they're recruiting you, like, look at all these posts this kid's doing. You want to have one more great idea that no one does? You want to have one more great, like, you have one idea that you want to hear from me that no one does, and it's the best idea I'll ever give you your whole life. You want to hear it? You're seriously going to hear it? Okay. The day you graduate from this university, you ready? The day you graduate, you send an email to the president of this university. Your email reads, Dear President, thank you so much for allowing me to attend this outstanding university. I would like to thank the following people who helped me while I was here. They are as follows. And you write the name of every professor, every faculty member who's done anything to help you, and maybe you write one sentence or one word that they've done to impact you. Okay? And then you say, again, thank you. I'm now joining the Alumni Association, because you should. By the way, if there's not one, start it. You can be president. It's great. Please let me know what I can do for you. Sincerely, you hit send. Now, you copy all those professors and faculty members that are copied on there. And when those professor members see that email, what will they do? They will cry. They will cry. When that professor dies and they're cleaning out their office, a printed out copy of that email will be in their office. I promise you. And you might say, John, what if on graduation day the president gets 84 letters? That president wound up finding me and being like, what did you do, right? It's not about me. And what I'm telling you is that level of thought process, thinking about appreciating where you're coming from and expressing that, God calls us to love Him and love one another. And when we express that love and appreciation, we're built to receive that too, right? Did you know that? We need it as well as we need to give it, because that's how we're made, period, right? So what if you said on your calendar for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, a day or a week, a month, you're going to work on your branding, telling your story. And in that, you're telling the story of the university and your classmates. Maybe your classmate kids have given a great presentation. You take a picture of them and put them up on your LinkedIn page. What does that say about you? Is this helpful? It's not part of the lecture, but just do that, okay? Anyway, connect to me. By the way, if you want to connect to me on Facebook, you're welcome to. There's some really cute pictures of my dog Pepper on there. Great Dane. She's adorable. We can talk about that if you want to. Good stuff. All right, let's talk about the history of shopping centers. You ready? Since the dawn of man, okay, shopping centers have kind of always worked the same way, all right? I find this kind of fascinating. So let's go back to the creation of the United States. When they created the United States, they did a thing called section township range. Has anybody ever heard of that? Section township range? You know what I'm talking about? It's when you grid out the community, right? The French did that, different people did that. You grid it out, so you know where everything is. When you do that, you create these little boxes. There's a midpoint to the edge. What's the distance between that midpoint and the edge? Anybody know? About 2.5 miles. About 2.5 miles, okay? I always think about like these old-timey towns like Little House on the Prairie. Remember the TV show Little House on the Prairie? Remember that? By the way, I was in South Dakota last week for spring break, because who wouldn't want to go to South Dakota for spring break? And we toured the Carrie Ingalls Museum. I thought it was the Carrie Underwood Museum. That's not the same thing. I digress. But I think about this little country church and them ringing the bell and the community kind of hear it, right? So that 2.5 miles is basically a little community. We have farms. That's how that worked. So now let's go to the Old West. We're expanding west. It's now the 1800s. And we're doing settlements. How far apart are the settlements? 2 miles. My brother has done a lot of church planting in Bolivia. And when he was planting churches in Bolivia last July, and he'd asked the locals, how far apart should we plant the churches in Bolivia last year? You know what they said? 2 miles. Publix, you guys all know Publix? Publix is expanding to Virginia right now. When Publix looks at a trade area, how big is a trade area? 2 miles. Does that blow your mind? I think that's super cool. You know why? Because think about it. From the time of horses to bikes to segways to who knows what, it hasn't changed the fact that by our Creator, how we are physically built, there's a certain level of comfort in walking and a certain level of comfort when we're not walking. And the answer is about 2 miles. Isn't that cool? I think that's super cool. And nothing's changed that. Okay? So old-timey downtowns, there was this concentration of people around the downtown. Okay? So, do you guys remember the movie It's a Wonderful Life? You guys know that movie? If you haven't, this coming Christmas, watch it. It's classic. When you watch that movie this Christmas, please remember this speech because I want you to study something. That movie came out in 1946, and it was very symbolic of what our nation looked like. Do you guys remember the scene in the movie where George Bailey crashes his car and he talks to the angel, right? And at the end of the movie, he goes running around the town and he's saying, "Merry Christmas" to everybody, right? He runs by his office. You know, at one point, then his girlfriend that were dating, they walked to the high school and back. The same way, he runs by his office, he runs to his house. Now, was that 26.2 miles? No. It was all within this tight community. My dad was born and raised in Toledo, Ohio, and my dad would talk about it when I was a kid. You know, when I grew up, when things were happening, they'd go downtown. Now, I had no concept of that, right? But that's what my dad was, that's what you did, you went downtown. And that movie just gives you a scale of that, of what America looked like. Okay, side note, has anyone here been to Natchez, Mississippi? Natchez, anybody? Natchez is a beautiful city. Natchez was really big, obviously pre-Civil War and pre-Boll-Evil, big cotton town. When the Civil War happened and the state of Mississippi voted for secession, Natchez voted against secession. Why is that? Natchez was a business town, business community. Now, if you go to Natchez, Mississippi, right now, it looks kind of like you think it would look like. Right in the center of town is a big First Baptist Church in Natchez. There's some big antebellum homes, that kind of stuff. You know what's across the street from the First Baptist Church in Natchez? A synagogue. Does that kind of surprise you? There's a really big, cool synagogue. Why? Because Natchez has had a very large Jewish population. If you go to Vicksburg, right up the way there on the Mississippi, there's a huge national monument there because one of the battles of Vicksburg is a big deal. And there's a cemetery there. It's a Jewish cemetery. There's actually a book called Jews in the Confederacy. Is that interesting? These were business communities, business towns. They were very mixed, different kind of cultures and people living there. Not what our perception would be, but that's how it is. You guys know that in Istanbul, Turkey, you can buy Christmas trees, and the company that owns the Christmas trees you can buy them from is a Jewish family. Isn't that kind of cool and weird? Like Turkey, the most Muslim country in the world, Jewish family making Christmas trees. Again, culture, community, kind of keeps coming around. All right, so then 1922 in Kansas City was the first ever shops that were built that was automobile accessible. Isn't that amazing? It wasn't that long ago when somebody said we need to build a shop center that cars come to. And then in Edina was the first enclosed mall in the 1950s. Now malls kind of started to hit their zenith in the 1980s. Oop, hang on, there we go. So that lineup there, Tabloid Screams, Elvis Scene in a Shopping Mall, that's from the group Living Color. And I like that because the 80s had a lot of 50s nostalgia, right? It was weird. I'm an 80s kid. I'm hungry like the wolf. No one gets that joke, but that's a Duran Duran song. My sister had that poster, by the way. Mallrats came out in the 80s. So in the 1980s, I honestly remember my dad saying to me, I just read this article about people meet in malls now. They don't meet downtown anymore. And I was kind of like, well, duh. That's where I see all my friends at malls. Malls were at their point in the 80s. That's where things happened. When I was a kid, middle school, parents would drop us off at the mall in the morning on a Saturday, pick us up at the night, and we'd spend the whole day there running around causing trouble. Very much a cultural thing. Now, Chris Rock. Chris, I'm not going to curse. I told you I wouldn't curse. I'm not going to curse. Chris Rock has a great comedy bit, and he talks about malls. Now, one of the things when he talks about malls is he talks about malls having all the same stuff. See? They're all the same, right? Now, in retail, consistency is very important. So, let me go back to McDonald's. Does McDonald's make the greatest cheeseburger in America? No, my brother-in-law Mike does, and it's fantastic, okay? But is a McDonald's cheeseburger consistent? Yes. And is there value in consistency? Yes, there's value in consistency. There's value that if we see a national, name another retailer you like, but anyone you can think of, if we were in India on a business trip, and we're like, oh my gosh, I just went whatever, and we see Wendy's, or we see Coca-Cola, or whatever. We know a Coke tastes the same it does in Dallas or Detroit or in Chattanooga, right? So there's consistency has value in retail. Make sense? What happened with malls is that malls became so consistent, they became kind of soulless, right? They became kind of islands and communities, and they became kind of disconnected. And I give you all examples of where the marketing really broke down. So malls then started to come very much out of favor because of that disconnectivity. So can anybody guess what was the big thing that really ramped up in the 90s that kind of replaced malls? Anybody? Guess? How about super Walmarts? Super Walmarts became the big thing in the 1990s. I used to have to give speeches in the 1990s about why the internet's not going to put us out of business, and then why Super Walmart's not going to put us out of business. By the way, I have a new speech. It's called Why Amazon's Not going to put us out of business. Do you know that a person came up to my mom in church? My mom is almost 80 years old. A person came to my mom in church a couple weeks ago and said, "I'm so sorry your son's going to lose his job because of Amazon." Really? On a lot of levels. Really? Really? Anyway, so Super Walmarts. Now, I want to tell you that one of the signs of success is repetition. You do something one time, that's great. But if you can keep doing it consistently, repetition, that's success. Super Walmart came out and went all over the country and blew things out, right? Did a great job. USA Today had an article in the 1990s that said people don't meet in malls anymore. They now meet in Super Walmarts all across this country. Who's getting married? Who's getting divorced? Who's getting pregnant? I don't know. Let's go to Walmart and walk around and we'll figure out what's going on in town. That really happened, okay? Now, I'm going to go a little fast because I'm running short of time. Super Walmarts became out of favor. The 2000s come up. Does anybody know what came up as the new concept in the 2000s? Anybody? No. Retail, the shopping center concept-wise.
Outdoor shopping.
There you go. Pretty close, pretty close. Let's talk about that a little bit. So first off, I want to start defining terms real quick. The top left corner, that's a neighborhood shopping center. What defines a neighborhood shopping center? It has a grocery store, some small shops. Publix, Chinese restaurant, pizza place, that's what a neighborhood shopping center is, okay? Community shopping center has a grocery store and a soft goods, right? So Publix and a Ross, plus a Chinese restaurant, pizza place, etc. Okay? Right? Power centers typically have all big boxes, almost no small shop space. And by the way, when people talk about retail being hit by Amazon, does Amazon hit these guys? Nope. I handle 400 shopping centers, almost all of them are 1 and 2. We're at the highest occupancy we've ever had, the highest rental rates we've ever had. We're doing great. This is impact us, right? That one, does that one get impacted? Yes, that one does. And by the way, when those boxes go down, what do we replace them with? People say, well, you can't replace them with retail. True, you know what we are replacing with? Medical, office, education, religious, apartments, right? Used to be if someone was sleeping on your property, it was a vagrant. Now it might be a resident, right? So we're coming with new different ways to kind of deal with those problems. And the last one, a lifestyle center. Has anybody idea what defines a lifestyle center, what makes it different? Entertainment. A lifestyle center has a movie theater. A movie theater, right? And by the way, when you guys ever read the book Creation Health, you guys know that book? Okay. So in Creation Health, when it talks about being a healthy 100 and how do we live to be a healthy 100 years old, how do we do it? We would always say diet, exercise. What's another one? Interpersonal relationships, right? We have to have interpersonal relationships. Properties and retail, the bigger ones that create opportunities for relationships are the ones going to make it. Office Depot has a new concept now where they have a table where people can come in, small businesses making copies, that they can then work and talk to other small businesses. They're trying to make a community experience within their office supply store. Isn't that cool? I like that. Anyway, back to the next concept. Ooh, I'm going to slip out of this. Town centers. Town centers became the big concept early 2000s. What derailed town center concepts was the recession, but they're still coming back, which is talking about the 2-mile radius again. Here's a key thing about town centers. Professor Chuck Bull at the University of Miami defines town centers this way. Town centers have a civic component to them. They have to have something that brings communities together. Okay, it could be a courthouse, could be an amphitheater, could be whatever, but brings communities together. A lot of times what happened in the early 2000s, people developed town center projects because they were architecturally looked like town centers, but they were functionally terrible, and many of them failed miserably. You ever hear about the politician that created the bridge to nowhere? They created a bridge that didn't really do anything, but they just got the funds in their state to get jobs. You ever heard of that? That's happened before. Well, there's a town center in Central Florida that has an architectural feature to nowhere. It has this really cool architectural feature. But if you're like, well, what is it? I'd say it's an alley. It's an alley. They made an alley look really, really cool, but it's an architectural feature. Tourist retail, real quick, I just want to say this one story, and I'm about to wrap up on this. In an average year, how many bottles of ketchup do you think you consume? What's an average number? 10? 10, 100? 100 bottles of ketchup? That's a lot of ketchup. You love ketchup. All right, how about this? Can we just settle on average household consumes 12 bottles of ketchup a year? Is that a fair, can we agree on that? Okay. So if you are young and married and you got no kids and you guys decide to go on a cool little vacation with your spouse and you guys go to a Ritz-Carlton and you stay for 3 nights, do you buy a bottle of ketchup? No. Well, how about it's now 10 years later and you've got 3 kids and you're going to stay in a timeshare near Disney. Are you going to buy a bottle of ketchup? Yes. So if you have a tourist area, any tourist area, and you have an apartment complex that's consuming 12 bottles of ketchup a year next to a timeshare unit that's consuming 52, how does that hit? Big time, right? I'll give you another little thing. Retailers hate return on sales. So I buy this tie, I decide I don't like it, I take it back, get my money back. So return on sales is not a real sale. So if you're a mall, big mall tenant, you want to average less than 10% return on sales. At the Florida Mall in Orlando, our average big tenant in there averages less than 5% return on sales. Why? Because when you're back in Detroit, Dallas, or Alaska, you can't return that tie, can you? Because you bought it on vacation and you're done. So that margin swing is huge. So tourist retail, it's a whole, I could go on and on about huge big margins in that world for a lot of different reasons. Okay. Things that are cool for our industry, we got to keep understanding demographics about the aging population. Not only the aging population, the active aging population, right? We wanted to build a gym in a tourist area, or not tourist area, in an active adult community area. And we talked to LA Fitness, and LA Fitness said, the guy said to me, he goes, old people don't work out. My mom, 79 years old, she works out way more than I do. A lot of people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s would go to the gym all the time. It's a big deal. It's part of the social component to it. So by the way, that developer built their own gym. It exploded. It's done phenomenally. They've opened more because it's done so well, okay? Asian population. The internet and the impact there. People still want to experience. Think about this. When live theater, radio comes, radio is supposed to kill live theater. Movies kill radio, TV kills movies, internet, all that kills, right? That's how that's supposed to work. You guys ever heard of Hamilton? How's it doing? Like $2,500 a ticket good, right? Isn't that funny? It was supposed to be dead 5 genres ago, okay? So people talking about this new concept is going to kill everything else. Yeah, that assumes no counterpunching, right? So great retailers that understand how to talk to my middle school age daughters who are almost 13 and 14, and my 79-year-old mom, and appeal to all of them. They got to understand that, but they do well, okay? And then I go back here to ethnicity. Man, really understanding the details in that. Publix is one of my favorite retailers on the planet because their store managers do a great job of connecting to the local community. What does that look like? Well, is this a Cuban community or is it a Puerto Rican community? Or is it a Guatemalan community? Or is it a Jewish community? Or is it an Adventist community? What community is it? And are you mixing up your store to match that community? Boris Bookstore opened up in the Village's largest retirement active adult community in America and made no difference to them what their mix was. They just did their normal mix. Huge rap section, huge grunge section, or whatever, right? They finally figured out and got rid of all that and replaced it with Sinatra and Elvis. Well, of course, guys, because that's your target audience, right? So great retailers need to be pretty flexible on who they're appealing to. You got to know who your customer is and know who they know who you are. I'm just going to wrap up. What does the future look like? It's not going to look like this. You know, it was really in the 1950s with the explosion of the interstate highway system in the suburbs that we started like putting retail here and office here and all these other uses here. That's not what the future's going to look like. The future's going to look like it looked in the past, like Natchez and all these other old towns where everything's kind of mixed together. Okay, I had a active adult. Let me clip to this. Oh, anybody know who that is? Who is it? Saul. Who's Saul? Who is he? You, glasses guy. Who's Saul?
He's from Breaking Bad.
Right. What's his occupation? Yeah. What kind of attorney? Sleazy would be good. Where is his office?
New Mexico?
Yeah. No. But what kind of? Is it in an office tower?
No.
It's a shopping center. Exactly. That's why he's in the presentation, right? So there you go. So a few years back, we had a Winn-Dixie that was in a shopping center. It went out. We cut the box in half, and half the box we put a gym, the other half we put a church. Okay. A friend of mine's dad died. The funeral was at the church. He asked me to come and be an usher. So I'm dressed like this. I'm standing there and I'm handing out the programs. While I'm handing out the programs, people are coming in and get a Kleenex. People are crying. A guy died. Handing it out, and I'm looking. Other people grabbing their gym bags and going into the gym. And I thought, man, this is really weird. And I thought, no, it's not. It's not weird. It's actually pretty normal, right? So Saul, he's a sleazy lawyer that's in a shopping center. But the reality is, that's kind of how our world's kind of always worked. Do you guys ever wonder why you have a family room where the TV set is, and the living room is this room that no one uses? It's real formal. Do you know why that is? Anybody know? The reason why that is because pre-1920s, there was no funeral homes. So when someone in your family died, you took them to the parlor room of your house and put them on the dead body of your family member and display in your house. People came by and saw the dead body, and then you took the dead body from your house to the cemetery and put it in the ground. Doesn't that make you feel good about your living room right now? Right? But that's where that comes from, right? Because there was no system for that since the dawn of man. Amazing, right? To know our past. All right, I'll wrap up. Ooh, that's my neighborhood. That's my neighborhood right there at Baldwin Park. Mixed use, really cool. Studied around the world, also went into bankruptcy. Right, I talked about bankruptcy and developers. The Villages, you ever want to see the most successful town center project in America? Look them up. Phenomenal. No one's doing better than them. This community has roughly 100,000 people in its trade area, which is probably 5 to 7 miles. There are retailers in that community that are doing the same as retailers in Midtown Manhattan. That blow your mind? Right? How do they do it? They do it because they're very well connected to their community. Right? Great retailers know how to do that. Great developers know how to do it. This is the final slide. So when I think about what I do for a living, retail is my main area, okay? But when I think about community, social fabric, education, healthcare, government, I'm interested in all those because they all correlate together. This has been helpful overall. I think we're out of time.
Q&A?
You take Q&A? Sure. You have any questions?
We have one more.
Go ahead.
When I first got to Collegedale, it wasn't as developed as it is now.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is the future of Collegedale as far as community development?
Oh, this local market? I don't know. I don't know on that one. I don't know. I'll get back to you on that. Sorry. What else? Yes, sir?
Who's your largest competitor
In Orlando, one of our top, it would be all the big firms, so CBRE, JLL, CW. It's funny, my firm is, we have 70 employees, we're a small firm, but we're ranked about 24th in the nation for what we do, which is kind of impressive when you think about it because all the others are global firms. Let me say one thing real quick about my book. If you want to put that real quick? One last story and I'll get out of your way, and I'll stay here for questions. This book is for any student, any major. You could buy it on Amazon, of course, Barnes & Noble, like that. If for some reason you really want the book and you can't afford it, just email me and I'll send you a copy, okay? But then give it a good review. I really appreciate that. I'm kidding. I did a presentation, there's a speech that you can actually go on I have a YouTube channel, Crossman Company. You can watch our YouTube channel. When I tell my daughters I'm a YouTuber, they don't believe me, but I really do have a YouTube channel. But there's a speech in there called The Top 5 Ways to Get Fired, okay? And, hang on. That's it. I gave that speech, and I wrote that speech for you. I wrote that speech for college students who are your age. And this is what I was thinking about is, it's 10 years from now, what are all you guys doing? Where are you at, okay? You guys should all be rocket ships, just blowing up your careers, doing a great job. And many of you will. But somehow, some way, Matt Lauer keeps happening. Can anyone explain that to me? Matt Lauer. What was he making, $20, $40 million a year? And he completely ruins his career because he has you know this story, right? He had a button in his office, he closed the door and locked women in his office and sexually assault them. I mean, he's like one of the most respected people in media, and his career is completely over. How in the world does that happen? Okay? So I wrote the book with that kind of stuff in mind. How do I help you be successful without having the sleazy stuff happen or whatever? So with that in mind, so this is my friend James Raffanon. And so this is James interviewing Jim Carrey and Jenny McCarthy, Tom Arnold, Ron Perlman. James led the children's ministry at my church. And the first time I saw him perform, it's like Sesame Street Live every time I go to church. So awesome stuff. When I turned 40, they threw me a big birthday party, and James like roasted me. It kind of hurt, but really funny stuff. One of the most talented guys I've ever known. Just crazy talented. There's me and James together. So I would get asked to MC charity events in Orlando. And I got to the point when I saw James perform, I started telling people like, hey, don't have me do this anymore, have James. Like, I'm the ranking amateur MC, he's a professional. Did a lot of cool Christian charity work. It's awesome. James, like a lot of guys, 34, 35, was running into some issues. He was having some problems at work. He was having some real problems in his marriage. And I remember talking to him and being like, hey, James, you know, I follow your wife on Facebook, and I'm telling you it's over. I can just tell you, I'm reading the tea leaves here, it's over. And divorce is hard, but you can get through that, and you can come out the other end, and maybe you guys reconcile. I don't know, but you got 2 sons, and we'll figure this out. And on the job side, I was like, man, we can help you out here. My nephew's a recruiter. Let's help you get a job. So we found him a job, like a 6-figure job, like over $100,000 a year job. And on the first day of work, I got an email from my nephew, and my nephew said, Uncle John, James didn't show up for work today. We found James' body the next day. And that photo before, the family used that for his funeral, which was in 2016. How did that happen? How do a guy who can interview Jim Carrey and Jenny McCarthy and be one of the most talented people I have ever seen end up blowing his brains out in downtown Orlando? How does that happen? His best friend was one of the most talented pastors I've ever seen. He did the same thing. So if people in full-time Christian ministry are blowing their brains out, how in the world, what hope do we have? Okay? Well, we do have hope. And a lot of times, people hide in church. Did you know that? Sometimes with people with the biggest wounding and the biggest issues, they hide in church. And so I wrote the book because I don't want that to happen to you. And I want you to know there's help and there's ways you can get through it. I talk in the book about how I've gotten through a lot of my own issues. I've suffered from clinical depression. I've seen a psychiatrist. I've seen a counselor. I've been through a ton of therapy. And one of the things I've learned about my career is when you look at my bio, you'll look at it and you'll go, man, that guy is really successful. And in a way, that's true. But I want you to know that I've learned through all my counseling, a lot of the success you read about my life came from my woundedness. It came from my hurt. It came from my sadness. It came from my inability to acknowledge that. And it became my heroin. So instead of processing, grieving the pain I was suffering with, I would then try to go be more successful. Now here's what's funny about it. When Jesus was told that one of his best friends died, what did Jesus do? What did he do? He cried. Why? Why would Jesus cry? Why would he be sad? Right. He knew he'd be in heaven. He knew he was in a better place. Right? But he didn't say, I call those Jesus jukes. Right? Like, oh, your friend died? They're in a better place. Like they're not suffering anymore. Right? That is not what the Bible teaches us. That's not what Jesus teaches us to do. Jesus teaches us, oh my gosh, your friend died? I'm sad too. And let's sit and cry about it. We read Psalms. Man, did David have passion? Did he have pain? Was he persecuted by people? When Jesus, in his final moments, when he was with his closest friends, and he said, stay with me, be with me, right? Christ gave us his humanity so that we would know how to live, right? And I'm telling you, you can have most awesome success in business, and I hope you do. And when you make all that money, I hope you come back here and endow a scholarship, by the way. But I'm telling you, it will never fill the hole inside of you, ever. Only Christ can fill that. And trying to constantly keep that balance is key. And you got to have relationships where you get real, and you talk about your pain, and you talk about what's going on with you, and you confess that, and you deal with that. And then sometimes in your life, the pain can be so overwhelming. Listen, Do you know that if you play professional football, there's a 100% chance you're going to get injured? Did you know that? Like you might miss one play, one practice, you're going to get injured. If you were a football player and you got drafted by a pro football team, they said they had no medical staff. Would you go play there? No, right? Well, let me tell you something. There's a 100% chance that everyone in this room will be devastated by some news in some period of their life, and probably within the next 5 years. You're going to lose a parent, you're going to have something happen. You have got to have people around you that have the skill sets to give to you. By the way, some of the people that have skill sets to give to you, maybe they did time. Maybe they're an addict themselves that's been through rehab. Maybe there's somebody that had a really, really bad, messed up life, but Christ changed them. And sometimes that's the person that has the skill sets to pour into your life, not the person that's got the MBA from Harvard. The Harvard person may have some great skill sets for you about business, but they may have nothing to give you when it's regarding the pain and the loss of somebody. Am I making sense? So if you want balance, you got to dive into both of that, the success part and also those other emotional parts. Anyway, I'll let you go. I just want to make sure I touched on that. Okay? Thank you. And there's some cards up here. You can take that. There's 2 copies of the book.